When was the last time you were scared out of your wits by a movie? Halloween, the motion picture about the most terrifying night of the year. Halloween, the night 3 teenage girls discover the real trick is to stay alive. Halloween, the night he came home. From Compass International Pictures, rated R.
Back to the show, everybody.
It's good, like driving around town music before you have to go to your babysitter gig.
It really is. So soothing, but also spooky.
Welcome back to the show.
Yes,
another movie in our October lineup.
Yes, indeed. Everybody out there listening, my name's Pete.
And I'm Scott.
And these are the movies that made us gay.
Yay! So excited for this movie.
Oh, my goodness. We've been waiting a while to do this one,
have.
and we're finally bringing it to you. Mm-hmm. But just in time for our spooky season. Scott, what do we have, and who do we have with us?
We watched Halloween from 1978, directed by John Carpenter, and also produced by Deborah Hill. I got to give a shout-out to Deborah Hill. You got to give Deborah Hill some love. With our horror bestie, returning Movies That Made Us Gay guest, Matt Emert. Welcome to the show.
Hey, guys.
Welcome back, Matt.
And I feel like now, I mean, I've known you for quite a bit, like, I mean, not quite 10 years, but, I mean, it's going up there. But I feel like now, whenever I think of John Carpenter's Halloween, I immediately think of you. Like, you're the first person that comes to mind.
That is what I want my life to be about. I'm serious, though. This is my favorite movie of all time. It is what got me obsessed with horror. It is what got me obsessed with the holiday Halloween. I mean, this has so much relevance in my life. You couldn't have picked a better movie for me to talk about, so I'm so excited to talk about it with you guys.
Awesome. And you're also, as we can see in this Skype conversation, you're wearing your Halloween T-shirt. Love that.
I can see a Michael Myers candy bowl back there.
Wow.
It says so. I only have about probably 6 to 8 Halloween-related T-shirts, and this one says Halloween Safety, and it shows Laurie helping Tommy Doyle, or reading to Tommy Doyle with a pumpkin, and Michael Myers is over them with a knife, and it says A Sitter's Guide. I think it's A Sitter's Guide to Halloween Safety.
I love it. We'll probably hit on this a little later in the episode, but we have to talk about Michael Myers as like gay, like sexy icon.
Michael Myers is a pinup
in 2020.
I have definitely, like the internet, they've turned most horror villains into gay, sexy daddies. I'm sure you've seen the pictures.
Like beefcake photo.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh, 100%. And Michael Myers, of course, he has like the mask and nothing else on. You know?
or those coveralls just slightly unbuttoned to show that chest.
Yes, or he's holding the knife in a very erect way near that area. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, we've already made this podcast hella gay. But Scott, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the movie? Give us some facts.
Yeah, released October 25th, 1978. This was budgeted at a mere $300 million. The box office is between $60 to $70 million, making it one of the most profitable independent films of all time.
Wait, say again how much it was budgeted for?
It was budgeted at $300,000.
$300,000.
Yeah.
$1,000. Okay, yeah.
And it went on to gross between $60 and $70 million, making it one of the most successful and profitable independent movies of all time. That's the thing, is that you kind of take for granted for this movie, but it's a pretty DIY movie. For the time.
Sure.
Oh, 100%. I mean, any time I've watched any sort of behind the scenes or commentary or whatever, they talk about that they were literally just like a bunch of kids making a movie. Like, they were all either in their 20s, or I think John Carpenter was just 30.
Wow.
And, I mean, of course, the stars were, Jamie Lee Curtis was 19. So it literally is like if you're right out of college and you're like, hey, friends, let's make a horror movie.
That's amazing.
It spawned a franchise of 11 films, which helped construct an extensive backstory for its antagonist, Michael Myers, sometimes narratively diverging entirely from previous installment. This is sort of the choose-your-own-adventure of horror franchises. There's, like, numerous, like, plot diversions that can go with this movie. I mean, there's, like, an internet meme of, like, a choose-your-own-adventure of this series that you choose one movie and what you liked of it, and you can go down, like, a path of certain movies that go there. Upon its release, there was a lot of comparisons to Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, especially with the iconic score by John Carpenter, and it helped spawn a whole subgenre of slasher movies to come out in the 1980s. All right, let's get into it.
I mean, there is a lot of stuff going on as far as the sequels and the lore of Michael Myers and, you know, the 2018 reboot and all of that. I feel like we can talk about that, but I think what needs to really be discussed is just how effective this movie as a independent film was, and how just, I mean, to me as a kid, it had the reputation of just being scary. Like, yes. That movie's just fucking scary. Like, for real, you know?
I saw it for the first time when I was 11 years old. I will never forget this because I came home from karate practice, and my mom, who also loves horror movies, which we bond over that, said, hey, there's a scary movie on TV. Do you want to watch? And I loved it, so I was like, okay. And we watched it on TV, so it was censored, you know, but right. It was... and I just remember immediately the music is terrifying.
Yes.
It is just the score.
Great score.
Like, so creepy, and so immediately you're terrified. And then I remembered it was such a slow build in a good way. Like, the way that they have Michael Myers stalking Jamie Lee Curtis and watching her all throughout, it just scared me. And I always thought about, like, when I'm walking home from school, is someone watching me? When I'm sitting at school, is someone there? And there are so many times when they're just building the suspense and you think something is going to happen, and then it doesn't. And it's genius in that, like, by the time a kill does happen, you've been on edge for so long that it's almost like a release. I just remember being so terrified watching it, and it building suspense in a way that I've rarely seen in any other horror film. So it just really made an impact on me as a kid, and then I just fell in love with the franchise and literally have been a fan for, I guess, 11, so 29 years.
Yeah.
Now that I'm 40.
Right.
Yeah, so but I'll never forget seeing it for the first time and the effect the original had on me.
Yeah, and I think for this movie in particular, we take for granted some of the things that it did introduce, things like a horror movie taking place on a holiday, you know? And ever since then, There's just like some successful, some not so successful, you know, horror movies that they just kind of decide to be on a holiday for no reason other than the fact that Halloween just worked so well, you know? The whole babysitter killer aspect, you know, like Scott said, the final girl. This kind of really introduced slashers in a way that we just kind of know and take for granted. One of the things that we take for granted so much about this movie, we were talking about last night, is that in that very first scene of the movie, that whole POV of young Michael, you know, murdering his older sister, and when the camera finally cuts back to the parents and they show him and they take the mask off and we see that it's a kid. Now, you know, we've seen this movie a million times. This movie is, you know, over 40 years old. We're just like, oh yeah, it's little Michael Myers. He killed his older sister. But at the time,
for an audience in 1978, that would have been a gag.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think you think it's just like this cute little kid. And by the way, because this is Movies That Made Us Gay, do you know that the guy who played the little kid in that one scene is now, number one, is now hot. He's like in his, like, I think 40s, maybe late 40s. He comes to all the conventions. This guy is set just because he was literally in one scene at the beginning of Halloween. Yeah, like, I think that's what's so crazy. You see this kid, and he's done this unspeakable act in this, you know, clown costume, and you would never suspect. He just looks, you know, defenseless, and you would never suspect, but then it turns into what they call pure evil, you know? It's just, yeah.
That's another thing. You know, Donald Pleasance plays Dr. Loomis in this movie. And, you know, right off the bat, the Psycho references, John Carpenter naming him Dr. Loomis after Sam Loomis in Psycho.
Yeah.
Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis is a little melodramatic with his description of Michael, just referring to him as it, and, you know, referring to him as the evil has escaped, you know, all of that. And it's like, okay, I get it. You kill your older sister. That's a terrible thing. I'm not diminishing that. But it was one murder, people.
No, it definitely. I think it definitely brought a little bit of camp to it. But I think, and again, only from watching millions of times and seeing millions of interviews, that one thing I heard is that John Carpenter said the whole character of Michael Myers was inspired by he visited a sanitarium as a young guy, and I guess saw a kid, and he said he looked at the kid through, like, I guess a doorway, and the guy looked like he just had nothing behind his eyes. And he said it terrified him because it's almost like, you know, there's some people in this world that are just bad people, but when there's just nothing there, that can be, it's like the epitome of evil. Like, you just can't even determine right from wrong. I guess it's basically a sociopath, but I guess that inspired him to create this character that just had no human emotions, no human-like characters, and then I think he camped it up a little with the doctor, you know?
So I was reading alternative castings with Dr. Loomis, which are interesting. So I guess that the role was intended for Peter Cushing from Hammer Horror Movies.
Peter Cushing.
And that would have been interesting because he would have just done Star Wars at the time, so he would have been very topical in the late 70s. He passed on it. And I think that they did offer it to Christopher Lee, who said no. And Christopher Lee, wasn't he in Assault on Precinct 13?
Yes, but I think wasn't Donald Pleasant? Sorry, my cat.
Oh, it's
wants
okay.
to
Mine
be,
is on my lap.
Involved in this. Okay, sorry. I feel like I thought Donald Pleasance or Peter Cushing was yes because Assault on Precinct 13 was the movie John Carpenter did before this, which got him. You know what? Okay, you're right. Peter Cushing was in it. Donald Pleasance said he decided to do it because he had seen Assault on Precinct 13. But yes, I think it was, you know, but just like Jamie Lee Curtis, I think you probably saw wasn't their number one choice either. And I can't remember, I'm bringing, but they had another person in line, but then apparently it was Deborah Hill who really wanted to go for Jamie Lee Curtis because not only was she new, but obviously the tie to Janet Leigh from Psycho made for a perfect story, you know?
Definitely. And I think she is really, I mean, she's really good as Laurie Strode in this movie in particular, just because she has this kind of like, you know, she's paired up with these friends, right? I'm
obsessed with the friends.
We love Annie and who's PJ Souls plays Linda.
And Linda, yes, totally.
I mean, Annie and Linda, it's like I get how Laurie is friends with them because at first glance you might be like, well, why is she friends with them? They're like oversexed and they're just like drinking beer and like boning their boyfriends, and Laurie is just like knitting while she's, you know, babysitting and like focused on school and all of that. But you know, sometimes that happens. Sometimes
that's how friends dynamics
your
work.
friends group is all a bunch of different weirdos.
What's the whole like Margaret Cho stand up?
And then there's the hoe.
Yeah.
There's this.
Yeah, but do you guys feel like every time I watch this that I feel like Linda and Annie are so mean to Laurie?
Yes, they love to give her shit.
Yeah.
I mean, but more than, I mean, I like to give my friends shit too, but it's like constant making fun of her, especially from Annie. Like, as an adult, I watch it back and see, and I'm like, wow, like, does Annie even like Laurie, or does she just have her around so she can feel better about herself? You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of those things, again, that I feel like I've seen this movie so much that you just kind of take for granted the dialogue and things. But when you actually try and sit back and watch it objectively, every now and then you're just like, wait a minute, that's so harsh. Like, come on. She is kind of like, she's rough with, like, she calls the guy and like sets up a date with somebody that Laurie said she thought was cute. Ben Tramer.
I love that they always refer to everyone with their first and last name in this movie.
Oh my God, totally. Yeah, totally. Oh God, I'm Linda. But yes, and it is funny because you think that, and again, other things I've seen is like, apparently there was some backlash in Halloween that they thought like the filmmakers were trying to make a statement about, you know, if you're having sex and doing these immoral things, you're going to get killed versus not. But John Carpenter, Deborah Hill, Jamie, because they've all said it really wasn't that. It's more about that because Laurie wasn't just stuck on everything going on with a boy boy or drinking or partying. She was more aware of what was going on, and she was able to actually, know or have the smarts to be able to do something and defend herself, whereas Annie and Linda were so oblivious to everything.
Yeah.
We all have friends who we feel like are kind of oblivious to stuff, and they just didn't know Michael was watching them, didn't know he's creeping. So it's so obvious that I don't think it's anything about you have sex, you die, even though I know that's kind of a trope. I think it's more like, if you're only obsessed with boys and drinking, you're going to get killed. No.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Laurie's she's not innocent. Well, I guess she is, but yeah, I think you're right. She's aware of her surroundings. She's a smart girl, and
Laurie's just more observant, and it ends up being her saving virtue in the end.
And I actually really love Laurie Strode as a character. I mean, obviously, because everyone knows, I was kind of a smart kid in school. I wasn't quiet by any means and was not incredibly moral. But I like that, she was everyone kind of knew the sort of goody-goody type. But she sets, she was very good with the kids. She's very compassionate. She's very strong. She, when she walks over to the house, when she suspects something's going on, she could have easily just ignored everything. So I feel like she does set up a good character that is compassionate, that's strong, that fights back, and she's always protecting the kids even before herself. Everything is about get the kids to safety and I'll deal with it.
Yeah.
So, I feel like it really sets up a respectable character, and I think that's why it's become so beloved over the years,
Yeah, for sure. So, just to kind of give a little bit of plot of the movie, we won't go beat by beat, but, Michael Myers, as we said, as a young child, he kills his older sister. He gets taken away to the crazy house. He gets washed over by Dr. Loomis, and it's right before his 21st birthday. Is that right around what we're saying?
He's supposed to be moved and to go on trial, I guess.
Yeah, and there's a crazy storm, and it's it's raining, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's raining. That scene where they drive up to the mental institution and all the crazies are wandering around in their hospital gowns is so creepy.
Mm-hmm.
It's
oh yeah,
so creepy.
And also just everything with the nurse who comes back, in the sequel and various sequels, because when I always go back to the very first time I saw it, because obviously the first time you saw it's when everything is a novelty. And when he jumps up on the car out of nowhere with that crazy sound effect, it's really scary. And basically breaks his hand through the window to steal the car. But of course, the big question that everyone jokes about is, how did he learn to drive a car when he was in an institution for 15 years?
He looked like he was doing pretty well last night.
I mean,
yes.
We just see the car
Maybe
drive
someone
away.
around here gave him lessons.
Yeah. We don't,
I know, yeah.
We don't see it starting and stopping and stalling out several times on the freeway, which maybe it did. But not only does he know how to drive this car, but he can figure out how in the dark of night to get back to Haddonfield, his hometown.
Without GPS.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. No,
1978.
True. Questions you can't ask. No. But I guess if it's true that, because you know how Dr. Loomis has one of his many speeches, and he says how he observed the kid, just looking at a wall and not seeing anything, but just looking forward to this time when he can escape. Yeah. So I guess you're going to think if for 15 years he was sitting in a room not doing anything, maybe he could have planned this great escape after 15 years of doing nothing else.
I like it. So he makes his way back to Haddonfield, where we meet Laurie, and Laurie's father is a realtor, and I guess he's preparing to sell
the Myers house because he tells her to drop off the key.
Yes, and the Myers house from the beginning of the movie has fallen into disrepair over the last 15 or so years. Laurie shows up. Mm-hmm. She sees her young ward, who she will be babysitting later. Tommy Doyle.
Good old Tommy Doyle.
Who, God bless him, just want to smack him every now and then. But so at this point, Michael's already in the house, because this is the first time we see his silhouette from behind, as she walks up to the house from the sidewalk. And
he looks like he kind of has some Mo Howard from the Three Stooges hair.
He's got a little kooky hair. We don't know if he has the mask yet, but it's just a silhouette. At this point, we find out that Tommy and the local kids say that this is a haunted house. The neighborhood kids know that some bad shit went down there, right? And like I said, it's fallen into disrepair and it's all gross. Do you think Laurie walking up the front walk, and Michael Myers just seeing her out the window? I mean, obviously, this is kind of where his obsession with her starts, and then he's just stalks her the rest of the movie, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Because I was asking Scott last night, why her? Why is he chasing her? What is the deal?
So there's many interpretations of how he started his obsession with her. Obviously, if you get to the sequel, when they brought on the whole sister connection, you would say that he came back specifically to kill his sister. I mean, they literally wrote Halloween 2 with that in mind. In fact, I'm sure you've heard about the footage that was added to put it on TV. Mm-hmm. Do you know about the extra scenes? And one of them they added, since John Carpenter wrote that while he was writing Halloween 2, one of the extended scenes in Halloween has them looking at the door of Michael Myers where he was staying in the institution before he left, and he had carved sister into the wall. So if you go off the so very obvious. If you go off the sequel, then his obsession started because of that connection. If you don't, and you go on the timeline of 1 and 2008, which I've been now kind of going off of because that's the latest timeline, then people say that he went back to his old house and she was just a teenage girl that sort of reminded him of his sister who approached the house, and that just kind of, I don't know if it stimulated him, titillated it, whatever word, and got him to start following her, and that's how the obsession started. So I think that would be the way of looking at it without the sequel and the sister connection in there.
And what's scary is that it's ambiguous. You don't know.
Yeah. In this version, in the 1978 movie, you're just watching it with no context. You're just like, why is he chasing? Like, why is he stalking her? Because he's clearly following her.
Yeah, and and sometimes, again, I've always said this about movies: the lack of a motive to me makes something more scary.
Oh, definitely.
I've always. So, I mean, and I'm not knocking the sister connection because I actually liked that and H2O, and at first was very surprised when they decided to nix that for the 2018 sequel. But I also think it is scarier when any random person who comes across his path could be the latest victim, or he could become obsessed with. And so it makes it really scary that a girl shows up at the house on Halloween and it suddenly, excites him enough to follow her and stalk her and her friends,
Yeah, definitely.
We should also probably give a shout out to the Myers house, which we have talked about on this podcast before. It is in our hometown of Pasadena. The Myers house to me is like, whenever I drive past it or I walk past it, it's like visiting like my grandparents' house. I'm like, oh, there's the Myers house. There it is.
And it's a dentist's office now, right? It's a dentist's office. And I visited it, and I know they moved it from its location. But that's what's so cool about living in Southern California and being a fan of this movie. So many of the filming locations, or all of them, are in Pasadena or in West Hollywood. And you can see the Doyle house, the house, Lindsay Wallace's house, the Strode house, where they Haddonfield High, everything. So it's really cool. But yes, the Myers house is like, people are visiting that all the time,
all the time,
right? I mean, every time I go, I see people near there.
Yes.
And they only moved it about half a block. Even when there's a shot of Laurie and Tommy walking down the street after dropping off the key, I think that you can see Mission Boulevard.
Like, it's the reverse angle, and you can
see
the
kind
corner
of where it is now.
The corner where the hardware store is. Where they
Can you imagine being the dentist in that? How can you not be like, I'm the dentist in the Myers house?
You just have to roll with it.
You should just make it a spooky dentist office. Come on.
I feel like that is such like niche advertising where he can say like, if you've seen Halloween, now get your teeth cleaned in the Myers house.
I don't know if it's a dentist office. I think it might be a law office.
Dentist?
I thought it was
dentist
a dental
sounds
office,
right.
I don't remember. We'll have to double check.
It could have changed, but for instance, the Strode house, which has that famous stoop that she sits on holding the pumpkin.
Oh, I've sat on it many times.
Yes, okay, so then the owners are cool enough that they put a pumpkin out there year round so people can take pictures. Yes, any fan knows that. But my point is saying that if you live in that sort of house, like just embrace it, go with it, use it.
Yeah, exactly. Don't be a Grinch like the people who own the Goonies house. and put up like...
What did the people...
Oh, they put up tarps so you can't take pictures. They tarped their entire wraparound porch because they are just so plagued by Goonie fans.
Then don't move into the Goonies.
Yeah, that's
like,
what
I mean,
I'm saying.
It's like if you don't want to live in a house where a murder took place, don't move into a house where a murder took place. Exactly. If you don't want to, exactly. So that's funny.
We often also, because it's kind of in the same neighborhood, is the house that Michael steps out from behind the bush. And then steps
I think it is. I have filmed myself stepping out from that bush, which sounds funny. I have done everything any crazy fan that you would think of, I have done. About the only thing I haven't done is I just saw recently that someone proposed to their fiancée on the stoop with the pumpkin and gave a pumpkin that said, "Marry me," carved into the pumpkin to their partner on the stoop. So,
okay.
That's the only thing I haven't done. But I mean, it is cute, and it's just like, the bush is there, all the houses, like, it's so cool that you can see these places.
Yeah, and if you are a movie person and you're there for this kind of like fun little, movie pilgrimage, it's also the same neighborhood that a lot of Back to the Future was filmed in. So you get a lot of bang for your buck if you just go hang out.
Pee-wee's Big Adventure, his house is just down the street.
Yeah, so South Pasadena people. Head out there and be a nuisance to our neighbors.
But don't you love that John Carpenter and Deborah Hill filmed this in Southern California in the spring, and it's supposed to be Midwestern Illinois in the fall?
Yep.
I love that. It's such like a rookie thing to do, but at the same time, I love that they did it and made it work.
Yeah. Just pay no attention to those palm trees off in the distance,
or the succulents in the garden.
Or the California license plates on some of the cars. I mean, there's so many different things. But what's funny is that these are things you could never get away with.
No.
Or, I mean, you could if you were doing independent films. But it's so funny that people can look back on this film and you almost love it more for its tiny faults.
Yeah.
It feels more authentic, for filmmakers.
Yeah. And there's just something about movies from, that time period that I feel like they didn't have to worry about the scrutiny of home video. You didn't have to worry about people streaming something or even having a VHS of something and constantly pausing it and rewinding it and screenshots and all of that stuff. You just get to make a movie for people to go see and enjoy and remember it. But now it's like every little detail has to be thought about. And also, we were kind of talking about it earlier, the idea of motives and the idea of backstories and all of that is just something that it's okay for a movie to be a little ambiguous. And like you said, it makes it a little bit more scary.
It's okay for Michael to just sort of be this blank slate of evil.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's okay to have a simple plot.
Yes.
Like, I feel like, unfortunately, it usually happens to any franchise. The first movie is simple and effective, and then every sequel they think, because they don't want to just remake the original, they have to keep upping the stakes. But even nowadays, since there's so much horror out there and so many streaming platforms, I feel like in order to break through, you have to have some novel idea. I mean, even Scream now, which was making fun of the fact that we already knew all these tropes, is now outdated because it's over 20 years old. Like, the fact that the movie that's making fun of dated tropes is now a dated trope in itself. It's just like, where do we go next? It just sucks because, to me, again, and that's why Halloween scared me so much. I was never as into Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street because I couldn't put myself in the position of someone in my nightmares killing me, because I didn't believe that. And Friday the 13th, the Jason parts just seemed so over the top, and it wasn't real to me. But to me, someone in a mask who's just following you and hunting you down and your friends, just that simplicity really affected me, and I felt like that could happen. It does happen.
I was a babysitter when I was a teenager. I could have been the Laurie.
Would you have been the Laurie, the Annie, or the Linda, though? Even though Linda
I was pretty square. I was pretty square as a teenager. I would have been the Laurie.
I love it. I love how she's so offended when, like, Tommy pulls out the comics that are like Robot Man and Neutron Man. She's like, first off, it looks like he's grabbing porn because it's stashed under the couch. But she's like, oh, I can understand why your parents don't want you to see. Oh, far be it for those robots.
Yeah, I was like,
and that's such a very quaint thing to worry about kids reading science fiction comic books. That's just such a thing from the past that nobody even talks about now.
Yeah, Lobster Man.
Oh my God, with internet porn available, that's the least of their concerns. A kid looking at robot or alien comics, you know?
We can talk a little bit about Tommy and the neighbor girl, Lindsay.
Played by...
Kyle Richards
from Real Housewives. So we got into the last season of Real Housewives, so I really got my introduction into Kyle Richards on that show. I still can't make my mind up about her on Real Housewives.
I do not watch Real Housewives. I know you have to probably take my gay card away for that. In that respect, I've never watched. I've never been into it. But what's funny is that when I heard about Real Housewives, I was like, all I would say was, Kyle Richards from Halloween.
Yeah.
And this is before she even signed on to the latest sequel. To me, Kyle Richards is all Halloween. So everyone says Kyle Richards, Real Housewives. I say Kyle Richards, Lindsay Wallace from Halloween.
And Kyle,
what I love is that she has a great relationship with Jamie Lee Curtis still.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I was going to say, and just Kyle and her sister Kim just they were just these working child actors from the 70s. That's so interesting.
Yeah, they just did the rounds.
Yeah, they just did the rounds.
Kim did a bunch of Disney movies. She did her.
Yeah, and you think it's like. I don't know a lot about the other stuff she's done, but I have seen her say that most people remember her from her acting other than Real Housewives, for Halloween, which I think is cool, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
She seems very gracious about it, and she will be in Halloween Kills.
I know. Isn't that awesome? I mean, but not just that, and I know, this we can talk about later if we even talk about, but the fact that Halloween Kills, the latest sequel, which comes out in a year, is bringing back so many characters from the original. I mean, I always say this to people, other than Star Wars, can you name one other franchise that has lasted for this long and brought back the original cast to come back and reprise their roles? You've got to be pretty monumental of a film to last for that long and bring back people who are still interested in playing their roles.
Yeah. Yeah, and it just speaks to, how successful this version of Halloween, this particular iteration of the franchise is. My friends and I would always, we watched this when we were teenagers a lot on Halloween. We'd get together and watch it every year, and we were fascinated by it because my friends and I grew up in and around Alhambra, which is one town away from South Pasadena where they filmed it. So we felt like this was our neighborhood. The
school that Tommy's at is in Alhambra.
Yeah, one of my good friends, Laura, went to that elementary school that Tommy Doyle went to. That was her elementary school.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so we had this connection to it, and we would always just pick up on these little things that were just so simple, but oftentimes some of them just went unsaid. Like in the credits, Michael Myers is credited as the Shape.
Yeah.
That's so spooky.
Yeah. And again, I've heard a lot over this too, and in a way I like it because we all know he's Michael Myers, but because it's almost like they're dehumanizing him.
Yep.
You know what I mean? He appears throughout the movie so much as just this really spooky shape that's watching them. It's not like anybody I mean, unfortunately, I think today in the latest movies, they would always call him Michael Myers. But in the first movie, he really was just this shape of evil.
Yeah.
And I think they could get away with it without it being hokey back then, before they really spent too much time talking about Michael Myers specifically,
Yeah, and that's the thing now. It's he's just become part of pop culture. We can't get away from the mask. We know this image, we know this imagery. But at the time, like you said, it was a lot more simple for them to refer to him as that. And just this mask in particular, it does have a face. It's William Shatner's face. Possibly. I don't know how apocryphal that is.
The story goes the art department went to Hollywood Boulevard and they picked up a Star Trek mask and they just sort of judged it up.
They cut the eye holes out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they cut the eyes out larger. They got rid of the eyebrows. They spray painted it white and messed up the hair some. But I've got to say, and again, of course I'm going to sound so biased because I love this movie so much, but I truly believe, and this is one of those less is more things, that the mask is terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, it's so, like, that's simplicity again. It's like you can have the craziest clown creature figure looking mask, and it can be so over the top that it's hokey. But this, I think they liked it because it looks so devoid of any emotion, and that is just terrifying. Like, someone with that mask on staring at you, I think it's terrifying, and I truly believe, even in the latest movie, they've never been able to recreate how amazing the mask looked in the very first movie.
What's the worst?
You're right.
What's the film that has the worst mask?
100% Halloween 5.
Right.
Sure.
Michael has a receding hairline, and nothing against receding hairlines, of course, but I'm just saying, I don't know why they had to give Michael a receding hairline.
It doesn't match the other ones,
and
right? It's like the face is different.
It's so bizarre. And then, like, in Halloween 6, it's a combination of the mask and the person playing him. He looks like he went to a gym for a bunch. You know, it's almost like suddenly he's muscular and broad shoulders.
all ripped.
And, yeah. Exactly, but Halloween 5 is, to me, the absolute worst mask. Like, literally, did you watch the original? And also, Halloween 5 took place only 1 year after 4, and I didn't really love the mask in 4 either, but, like, if it's only a year later, why not just keep... Like, did they really mess up the mask in 4 1 year later?
Did they have to give it away for charity? I don't know.
I really wonder about... I know after the first movie, I get that they didn't take care of the mask because they didn't think there'd be a sequel.
Oh, sure.
And then the second movie, it was done. But after 4, come on, you made a 5 like 1 year later and you completely redo the mask. I think it's... Oh, one other really bad mask. There's one scene in H2O where they had to put it in at the very end and they used CGI. And it's so obvious that the mask is CGI. It's right when the kid is going in the garbage disposal and then sees Michael in Halloween H2O. Oh. And when you watch it, you'll see it. You'll see the mask, and it's a computer-generated Michael Myers mask, and that's pretty bad, too.
Is it? Wait a minute. Is it baby Robin Williams from Jumanji in the kitchen?
Yes.
Wow.
He goes into, and, you know, they have that good scene, suspenseful scene, where you think Michael's going to turn on the garbage disposal, but he doesn't, and the kid finally gets the corkscrew, and he turns around, bumps into Michael, and says, hi, and you see CGI Michael looking at him. It's ridiculous.
Why did they do that?
Maybe they just didn't get the shot right?
I read... It's so sad that I've read all this, but I read that what happened was they had filmed a lot of scenes with a mask that Jamie Lee Curtis ended up not liking and thinking looked as much like the original, and they tried to refilm a lot of parts with the better mask. That was one that they couldn't do, so they just CGI'd it so it didn't look weird, and I don't know.
I love that as they're doing post for H2O, Jamie Lee's just like, nope, that mask is wrong, fix it. And they did.
I mean, you know, when you're an executive producer and you have the power that she has, I mean, now I love it that she's like one of the in-charge people. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, I love it because that shows how much she loves this series.
That's what I was going to say.
And you saw, I mean, because Halloween 2018, I mean, she was doing more press than I've seen her do for anything in her effing life.
I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis can push a movie on her Instagram months after the release date, as we saw with Knives Out.
I was just going to say Knives Out, she's still posted about it.
I think that she's still on the press tour for it.
Oh, man.
I mean, it's funny. But talk about being loyal to your... I mean, wouldn't you love to have Jamie Lee Curtis in your movie? She's like, I will promote it for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, we have.
But
a soft
I love
spot
it. I mean,
for,
she has even said
we have a soft spot for H2O here at Movies That Made Us Gay. It's a little corny, but
it's definitely a product of the post-Scream movies, the Harvey Weinstein and Dimension like takeover. It's also a movie that I feel like, as much as I love it, it also feels like it's kind of cut to death. Like it clocks in at just under 80 minutes. So I think that there was a lot of shit that they ended up cutting for the movie.
I do like H2O. It's one of my favorite sequels. I will say, I mean, obviously, because Jamie Lee Curtis is in it and they kind of went back to their roots,
Yeah.
I will say it does feel like, I call it the Scream version of Halloween, because it's very, fun, entertaining, witty dialogue with the kids, and it, because it took place back then. I think my biggest problem with H2O is I felt like Jamie Lee Curtis was playing Jamie Lee Curtis, not Laurie Strode, whereas in the 2018 Halloween, I genuinely felt like she was Laurie Strode again.
Yeah.
She looked like her, she sounded like her, her emotions were like her, whereas she was just too cool in H2O,
The characterization in 2018 felt very on point, and I think that Jamie just had a lot of say into this is how we're going to do this character now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my biggest problem with Halloween H2O is definitely Michelle Williams' styling and her eyebrows in particular, but that's for another podcast.
And also the most successful headmistress under the age of 40.
Yeah, she's killing it at
the
school, man.
She's like 38 years old and is like the headmistress of this private school.
I know, exactly. And I do think Josh Hartnett's hair should get its own
I can't
award
with his hair.
because, like,
those goat-chewed bangs.
Like his,
what is
it's the hair sticking up in the end,
the little flip in the back? What is
yeah.
going on with that? It's a bowl haircut.
Well, he didn't get it cut for the faculty either.
Awful.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that became his thing, like, hey, like the brooding teen. But I mean, of course, it was a great first role for him, just like Jamie Lee Curtis having her first role in Halloween. Like to have your first role to be in such a big movie at the time, that's pretty cool for him.
So we were talking a little bit about Jamie Lee's portrayal of Laurie through the years, in H2O in 2018. I have a little clip of Laurie and the gang from early on in the movie where they first kind of spy Michael, and so we can kind of get a feel for her delivery and her characterization. Let's take a listen.
You're babysitting tonight.
The only reason she babysits is to have a place.
Shit. I have a place for that. I forgot my chemistry book.
So who cares? I always forget my chemistry book and my math book and my English book and my French book. And, well, who needs books anyway? I don't need books. I always forget all of my books. I mean, it doesn't really matter if you have your books or not. Hey, isn't that Devon Graham?
I don't think so.
I think he's cute.
Hey, jerk! Speed kills! God, can you take a joke?
So at this point, she had already seen him at school.
Yes, he was standing outside of the class with the mask.
Yes. And I feel like, she doesn't... The one thing I think is she's definitely spooked, but she doesn't voice it more. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I guess I look at it as if I saw someone standing outside watching me, I'd be telling my friends all day. Yep. I'd be telling my parents. I would not be babysitting. I would not be thinking of my chemistry book. And so she kind of doesn't say anything until after everything happens between seeing him after the bush, seeing him in her backyard. She finally tells Annie when they're in the car, and I'm like, oh my God, something is obviously wrong. Like, this isn't just coincidence.
Yeah, for sure. I think she's a little bit more, flase-da about seeing him, especially, like you said, she's in school, she sees him outside the window of the classroom, then sees this same guy drive past her slowly and stop the car. Seeing him in the backyard, that's the one. That's where I'm like, oh, hell no.
Oh.
My best friend's dad is a cop. I'm calling him.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that and the bush scene, I love saying it. The bush scene.
Yeah, the bush
no,
scene.
that and the bush scene... Again, always, I guess I should call it the hedge.
There you go.
The hedge scene in the backyard always terrified me because it is, again, I always put myself in these positions. Like, I used to walk to school in elementary school, and if I ever saw someone just, standing by and staring at me with a mask like that, that would scare the shit out of me. And then, obviously, in the backyard when you're by yourself, it's just so effective. It's done so well. And I just love that, Linda right away... thinks about a cute guy. Annie right away has a smart-ass comment,
Yeah.
I feel like Pete and I will just be walking down the street and we'll see a car drive by and we'll just say, is that Devon Graham?
I think he's cute. I love that. And also, don't you love... But one of my favorite things about that scene also is that when the car drives by them, it's not that far away from them, and I can clearly see that the person inside's wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Did they not see? Is Devon Graham really pale? I just really want to know.
He's got crazy hair.
Because I just want one person one time to say, is someone is that a mask
Yeah.
that the guy's staring at me with? Not one time does she ever... Even when Laurie says, you know, he was standing in the backyard and they think it's the old neighbor, they never say it's someone with a mask. So do you guys think it's just because we're supposed to think they think that mask is really just a person?
His crazy face.
Maybe.
Yeah, possibly.
I just always found that funny in all these years. They never say...
You're right. She never...
That person is wearing a mask and staring at me. And that's or because it's Halloween. And
that's
it's just
true.
normal.
Yeah. Maybe it's Halloween and they're just like, okay, everybody's in costume. We also have a little bit from the bushes or the hedge scene. So we'll listen to that right now since we're talking about it.
Behind the bush? I don't see anything. The guy who drove by so fast, that one you yelled at? Oh, subtle, isn't he? Hey, creep. Laurie, dear.
Wants to talk to you.
He wants to take you out tonight. Standing right there. Poor Laurie. Scared another one away.
I like that Annie just has these balls of steel. Well, I'm going to go fucking talk to him. That creep. Like, she's going to go call him out.
And what a bitch. Like, also, poor scared another one away.
Oh, my God.
I'd be like, fuck
so
you,
mean.
bitch. Can you imagine your friend, like, I mean, and then I think she tries to cover it up, but, oh, it's tragic, you never go out, you're always babysitting. I just think it's so funny, her comments are so just demeaning to poor little Laurie.
Totally. I love it, though. It's so cunty. I think it's delightful. We have to give a shout-out to Deborah Hill, because I think that she is the one that wrote all the girls' dialogue.
Yeah, and by the way, Deborah Hill is amazing and is so... every time I think about that she died so young of cancer, it always upsets me because she was not only on a career to be a great, probably director herself, was just paving the way for women in filmmaking.
She was a trailblazer.
Like, was one of those people that, was not going to just sit and help the man, even though she did with John Carpenter, but she was working toward her own project. She spoke up for women in film. She would have been one of those, like, barrier breakers. It's so awful, and I hate, because I see interviews with her, she was so eloquent, she was so smart, so she's definitely just as part of this movie as John Carpenter,
She even stood by John Carpenter when they broke up and he was dating Adrienne Barbeau and they made The Fog.
I know, and she still worked with him, and she still has nothing but good things to say. It's she was a class act, and it's just it's really sad. It is really.
And she
sad.
gave us Clue.
And she would have loved. Well, and also, she would have loved, whereas I know John Carpenter is an executive producer on the 2018 Halloween, and he did the score, and I'm grateful. But have you seen interviews recently with John Carpenter? Because he comes off as so much of a curmudgeon. And I'm saying this knowing that he's one of my idols.
Yeah.
I love John Carpenter. He's immensely talented. If it weren't for him, there would be no Halloween. But sometimes he comes off just kind of like, well, if I get a check, I'll do it. and versus someone who loves the film, whereas Deborah Hill, at least everything I've seen with her in it, I feel like she would have just loved where Halloween has come and totally been a major part of the 2018 sequel if she could have.
Yeah, definitely. Agreed.
I have to give a little shout out to Mama's Family because when they drop off PJ Souls, I'm obsessed with this. So this location, which we've been to a handful of times, and we've actually have seen just guys dressed up as Michael Myers just wandering around this block, which is insane to see that just driving by in your car. But when they drop off PJ Souls, she walks up the walkway to the Harper's resident from Mama's Family.
Really?
So do you think that PJ Souls' character could be a Harper?
I want to know how she got out of taking her brother trick-or-treating. She says, I just need to get out of taking my brother trick-or-treating.
That's right.
I want to know... I also want to know why anyone hires Annie or Linda to be a babysitter, because they've got to be the worst babysitters.
Oh, we have thoughts of this whole child situation later in the movie.
Annie takes Annie takes Lindsay, drops her off across the street with the responsible one, Laurie. But it's like, what is the thought process behind that? Like, walk me through that. Like, what
are the parents going to think when they get home?
Let's say Annie wasn't murdered. Like, they're just going to come home to nothing?
So there's a million... I have so many questions. Number one, what happened to Paul? Because when Paul wasn't picked up by Annie, did he ever check up on her? Yeah. Did he ever... Like, I always think about that. You know how she says, well, first off, and this is only me, like, delving into every little thing. In the dialogue, when Annie's first trying to talk with Paul, she says, why don't you just come over? A.k.a. he's closed. And he says, no, pick me up. Okay, so she never shows up because she gets murdered. Is Paul... Why didn't Paul go over to check up on her? Why didn't Paul call Laurie? Paul just doesn't care about Annie. But, yes, to the kids, my biggest thing is, what if the parents came home and... Yeah, Annie's going to say, oh, I just dropped her off in another house and they put her in the same bed as Tommy Doyle?
Yeah, it's like, I know they're little kids, but come on. Oh, my God.
Also, this party that the parents are out, which is like... Is this an all-nighter key party? What time are they getting home?
I love... Well, in Halloween 2, which, again, if we keep that as part of the mythology, when Laurie Strode gets to the hospital, she says, have you reached my parents? No, we still can't get in touch with them. Oh, where are her parents? Like, I mean, come on.
They're still at the key party.
That parents are going to... Exactly, the party, and they're just not there. Lindsay's parents aren't there. Tommy's parents. Apparently, every party went to this rager. I mean, every parent went to this rager.
My parents definitely weren't going to all-night Halloween parties when I was a kid.
I love a Haddonfield parent rager. What is going on?
It's gotta be.
Maybe it's like the party from Hocus Pocus where all the parents have took over City Hall in their own party without kids.
Witches put a spell on them so that they dance all night.
Dance all night long. That's why they never came home. And nobody can get a hold of them.
It is.
So right now we take for granted the fact that we can just reach each other at a moment's notice. But sometimes back in the day when you made plans with your friends and they fell through, you were just kind of fucked all night. So there is a possibility that Paul is just like, what the shit, Annie? She's not home. So he has to call Lindsay's parents. So he might not have the number. Paul doesn't seem that bright.
And, now that I think about it, remember the scene when Linda and Bob are having sex in the bed and the phone keeps ringing and they're like, we can't answer it? Let's just suppose that's Paul.
There you
probably.
go.
Yeah,
that was him
Annie.
calling.
There you go. Okay. I mean, because he's probably like, hey, Annie, you going to pick me up?
Yeah.
No, she's dead.
So here's another thing. What's PJ Soul's character's name?
Linda.
I'm forgetting. Linda and Bob.
We were trying to figure out if Bob was hot. Kind of. If you take those Coke bottle glasses off, I think that he's hot.
I think he's cute, and I will say this. I went to the 2018 40th anniversary Halloween convention.
Love it.
And that's sadly not the first Halloween convention I've gone to. But Bob, the actor who played him, was there, and he's aged really well.
Oh, nice.
I did a Google search of him. He looks pretty cute.
He is. So I've got to imagine by the fact that he's still a handsome man that he was pretty cute back then,
So I just love the fact that Linda and Bob are just like, okay, we're going to meet up with Annie and Paul. She's babysitting. She's got the house to herself. We're going to go and we're just going to bone because we're teenagers and we can't do it in our own houses. So they just need a place to go. So Annie's like, come over. You could use one of the empty bedrooms in this house. Annie's nowhere to be found, so they're just like, oh, she's probably out picking up Paul right now. Let's go up into this stranger's house we are now breaking and entering.
Get into their bed.
Fully get into bed and just bone zone.
It's hilarious because you think, again, if there was... erase Michael Myers from the storyline for a second, just in our hypothetical world. Annie comes home with Paul and finds them fucking in her babysitter's or the kid's parents' bedroom.
Or worse, Lindsay's parents come home and find that.
It is. And there's not one... The only reservation is when Bob doesn't want to answer the phone because he says, well, it could be Lindsay. So at least they put that in there. But I just love they're literally in the bed. No cares in the world about that. But hey, don't answer the phone.
Yeah. These kids are so hepped up on booze, they couldn't care less.
I love Linda's orgasm.
Linda's getting it. Bob is giving it to her.
we are getting to probably the most iconic scene of the movie. I don't know if you want to wait to talk about that, but with the sheet over the ghost but leading up to that, before we even talk about that, I love that, again, Bob goes down to get beer. So did they bring their own beer to stuff in the Wallace's fridge?
Yeah.
I mean...
Or are they just cleaning out these people's, like...
I think that he's just cleaning out Lindsay's dad's, like, Schlitz or something.
Also, and I truly hope they address this in Halloween Kills by how much time they give Kyle Richards, but whatever, the Wallaces got the shit end of the stick because they have to come home and know that there were 3 murders in their house. How do you live there ever again?
Sure.
Like 3 teenagers were murdered. So I'm hoping that they maybe address that, like Kyle Richards said. Well, obviously, I guess she didn't move because she's still in Haddonfield 40 years later. But I always thought about that house got it the worst because that's where every murder took place.
Well, according to Kyle Richards on Real Housewives, she is like number 2 on that call sheet. Of how she would talk about the movie.
If you listen to her side of the story, she's going to be in it a lot. We'll see.
I hope that she's driving the truck that Laurie, her daughter, and her granddaughter get picked up in that teaser.
Oh my gosh.
She's like, I got bangs, girls.
I want her and Tommy Doyle to visit Laurie at the hospital. I would love that. And I would also love for Tommy to bring some of his old comics to see if Laurie still will read them, too.
Played by Anthony Michael Hall.
Yes. Have you heard the reason? I don't know if you're wondering, like, why Brian Andrews, who played Tommy Doyle, didn't reprise the role.
No, what happened?
We were wondering that last night.
So apparently, I don't know a lot, but I have seen him on social media, and he's a little crazy. Apparently, again, I don't know for sure. I've just seen some crazy posts. I think he has a lot of animosity because he wasn't asked back for Halloween 6, which had Tommy Doyle.
Sure.
I don't think he acts anymore, and I think they wanted someone who was an actor. But I think when they probably figured if it didn't work out for Halloween 6, we're not going to try to even get him for 2018. And like I said, I think he's very like anti the series now because I don't know. Again, this is all speculation, but I've seen social media stuff where he seems a little crazy. Whereas Kyle Richards has always been like so beloved in the franchise, you know.
Very interesting.
I think that they tried to get Paul Rudd, and he was just unavailable because of Ghostbusters. That would have been interesting because that would have made the timelines even crazier. That you're putting an actor from that.
As I love Paul Rudd, and I think he did great in the movie. But yeah, it would have been really confusing. If you're saying you're ignoring all the movies, why would you cast someone from one of the movies that you've ignored?
Yeah.
Sure.
You know?
Agreed.
So you know what's interesting about PJ Souls? That I know that she's a big like Trump supporter. So I'm surprised that she hasn't gotten into it with Jamie Lee Curtis online. Maybe she just knows to just pick her battles with something like that.
I wouldn't want to get into it with Jamie Lee Curtis online.
Yeah.
No, but Jamie Lee Curtis is very much an anti-Trump. I didn't know PJ Souls was a Trump supporter.
I think that she's kind of a big manga supporter, which is a bummer.
That is a bummer, and it's just unexpected because, do you know, she still does roles in little, like, straight-to-DVD horror movies. Really crappy ones, actually. I saw her in a trailer for one that looked really, really bad. But I guess you just think someone who has been such an integral part of horror, considering the groups like, you know, the LGBTQ community who loves horror, that you wouldn't support someone like that. But whatever.
People are complicated.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and come on back in right about here. And what were we just talking about? We were talking about casting for the...
Oh,
it would have been fun to see Paul Rudd just because I love Paul Rudd, but I get it. It would have just been confusing. So probably Anthony Michael Hall is the better bet. Or the better,
he has a Tommy Doyle look to him. Like, I mean, in a way of how I would imagine Tommy Doyle would age to look. And I also think maybe, again, that was everything I said before was all speculation based off of things that I've seen people say on social media. So I don't know the real reason. But also maybe they wanted someone who looked more. I think Brian Andrews is short. I don't think he's a very tall guy. And maybe they wanted more of a menacing look for Tommy Doyle. I have no idea. Just what you see on Reddit.
They probably just wanted a better actor, too.
I mean, it could be many things. I just know he's, I think, pretty bitter.
Oh, Too bad.
Which I guess I would be too if they were in a iconic movie that they were bringing back the cast and I wasn't brought back. I'd be pretty pissed.
Yeah, true. Well, so yeah, all this shit goes down, and it's interesting that it does go down in Lindsay's house.
Yeah, so
most
we're
of the
getting to
murders.
the favorite scene.
Yeah, well, oh yeah. I was going to talk about the fact that Michael Myers had the time to arrange these lovely tableaus throughout the house with with all of their bodies and his sister's headstone that he stole.
That he stole in broad daylight, or maybe I guess no, he probably stole it the night before when he drove out there.
Sure,
but
with his bare hands.
I do think you've got to say, Michael Myers has a slight sense of humor because after he kills Bob, he decides to tease Linda by putting the glasses on him wearing a sheet, so it looks like Bob's playing a trick on her.
Yeah, that image of him with the sheet and the glasses, and they're those 70s like big
I love it.
glasses. It's so creepy, so effective.
It's creepy and effective and hilarious at the same time. Like, I think the first time I saw it, I was terrified, again, being a kid and not knowing what was going to happen. Now I watch it and I just love it. Everything, like the dialogue, the see anything you like, my favorite line, and when she cracks herself up by saying, "Can't I get your ghost, Bob?" She thinks she's so funny, you know? And just the fact that he's standing there not saying anything, and it takes her a while to finally realize maybe something's wrong here.
Yeah. We have a clip of that as well. We'll take a listen.
Oh, good.
See anything you like? What's the matter? Can I get your ghost, Bob? All right, come on. Where's my beer? Well, can't you answer me? Okay, don't answer me. Are you weird? Well, I'm going to call Laurie. I want to know where Paul and Annie are. This is going nowhere.
I love that Bob, when he was downstairs, something happened, and he goes, "Linda, you asshole."
Yeah. Everyone thinks that everyone is trying to scare them, which, you know, is pretty authentic because people... Well, first off, everyone tries to scare their friends, and especially on Halloween, but it is kind of funny. He just thinks... It's like the theme throughout. Everyone thinks, oh, they're just playing jokes on me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that scene is super creepy, super scary. We haven't played any Loomis clips, but we talked about him a little bit.
He loves a good monologue. He loves a good soapbox.
I mean, and by the way, like a theme through this movie that becomes a recurrent theme through every sequel that he was in is they always blame Dr. Loomis.
Yes.
And it always frustrated me because, I think the sheriff in this one says, "You let him out," this is why did you let him out? And he keeps saying, "No, I didn't. If anything, I said that he should be in maximum security, but no, it doesn't matter. It's always your fault. It's your fault, Dr. Lewis."
He escaped. Wait,
and that's the thing, yeah.
Do they tell us what happened, like with the whole escape situation at the beginning? Is it a power outage? Like, how do they all escape?
I think it's kept pretty ambiguous.
Yeah, the only thing they say is in that scene that was added just for television because they needed more footage to fill the TV 2-hour time slot. There's a scene after he escapes, like I was saying, where Dr. Loomis is with a nurse and she shows him his room before he escaped, and like everything's thrown aside, and like I said, the sister is carved into the door. So they don't actually talk about the escape as much as that they're setting the seed that he had a motive or an objective.
Interesting.
I don't know when I had this taped off of TNT if that version was it.
They don't show that version anymore, which sucks because every time I see it on TV, like AMC Fear Fest, I think they're going to show the TV version, but apparently it was for NBC or something. You can still get it on, obviously, collector's edition DVDs, but even though they call it the TV version, it was that one network then TV version. So...
you want to hear something wild when I first saw this movie?
Yes.
So I remember it was the summer that H2O had come out, and I had not seen Halloween, but I was very interested in just Jamie Lee Curtis and H2O, and I just needed to track down this movie. And I remember when I got home from the Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman movie Practical Magic, and it was on cable, and I got the end chase scene.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. So then I went back and I rented it from our video store and watched the whole thing.
Wow.
That's like the scariest part of the movie.
Yeah.
I can't believe
what
you
is this?
seen it.
I need to watch all of it.
Yeah, how had you dodged it all the way until then?
I was at the movie.
No, but I mean like your life.
Yeah.
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 I'm shocked. Yeah, but I mean, 1998 is when you first saw it. Wow.
Mm-hmm. But I was also like, my relationship with some horror movies when I was a kid, I would be very standoffish with them. Like, I remember looking at all of the VHS boxes of all of the sequels and just thinking, like, this movie is way too scary for me. But I'm just going to memorize this entire video box.
Video boxes were very effective in the old video store in kind of telegraphing what you were going to get when you got home.
And there's always something very fascinating, scary about the horror section of a video store.
Oh, I used to, I mean, God, as a kid, I'm sure we all remember as a kid, but I would always go right to the horror section, look at all of the covers. I'd go right to seeing the Halloweens in order and seeing how many of them they had. And that was so much fun back, doing that,
Yeah, I agree. I definitely was very much into horror movies, and I was more of a Nightmare on Elm Street kid growing up, but I had more of an appreciation for Halloween. Like I said, when I was a teenager, my friends and I started to watch it a lot, and that's when I just kind of became obsessed with this movie. Not so much the rest of the franchise. I feel like we would watch this one every year in high school, and then saw 2, and I was like, that was kind of weird. And then we all just kind of had this idea, or that we had heard or read, that like the rest were kind of not as great. So I stayed away from them for a long time.
Yeah.
And we actually revisited 2. Was it last night?
Yeah, it was last night.
Last night.
We watched them back to back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, it is fun because it's like it just keeps going.
Yeah, and the thing is, I like to. I mean, the way I saw 1 first, and then I rented 2, and then I didn't know that 3 had nothing to do with it, but quickly found out, and rented 4 and 5, and I just remember I like 4. I don't really like 5, but I just really missed having Jamie Lee Curtis in them. So that's why when H2O, or I found out H2O was coming out, I just was so excited just for them to bring Laurie Strode back, because to me, the original was just the best. So I felt like they were recapturing the original. But I think 2 holds up. I mean, it definitely does not have the same suspense. It just goes from kill to kill to kill, which was different from 1. But and I don't like it that there's not Jamie Lee Curtis is just in the hospital in a bed the whole time until the end.
Wearing a shake and go wig.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you're right. It does feel like it's like a fun continuation. It's just like more of what you like, just not as good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely true. 3, I mean, that's a whole other ball game.
Do you know we've never seen Season of the Witch?
Who's we? I saw Season of the Witch.
I've never seen Season of the Witch.
Who's we? I mean, it's a different movie. That's the thing. It's
attempting to do an anthology series, which the people did not want.
Nice try, John Carpenter.
The sad thing is, I actually do know a lot of people who like that movie.
Yeah,
I'm not one of them, but I know a lot of people. It has a big cult following. I actually think it would have been successful if they just called it Season of the Witch and didn't attach it. Everything they thought, we just got to attach it to Halloween. Like you said, it'll be an anthology, but that actually came back to bite them in the ass, because if everyone hated that it didn't have Michael Myers.
Yeah. I remember my next door neighbor, Chris Vialva, invited me over because his older sister and my older sister went to a Halloween party together. And so we were like the younger brothers who were just like, well, I guess we have to stay home. And we were both like 10 and 11. And so he was like, well, come over to my house and we'll watch a movie. And we watched Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, and he had seen it already. They had rented it. And so he had already watched it, and then he watched it again with me, and I was just like, what is this? And I was not familiar with the first two. I was like 11, so I was like, what is going on? I wasn't thinking like, where's Michael Myers? I was just like, oh, this is just a horror movie. And he's like telling me about the masks, and they're like putting the masks on, and like all this shit's coming out. I'm just like, what's happening? It really kind of freaked me out as a kid. Looking back, it's not that effective. But as a kid, not knowing what it was, I was just like, okay, this is kind of spooky. But I also feel like we were just like eating candy and just like talking about, Married with Children or whatever, and just not really paying that much attention. So
it's a weird, creepy premise that on its own could be, I guess a decent horror movie if it was on its own. But because it got put in the Halloween series, people just tend to shit on it all the time because it had nothing to do with it and it was so weird. But again, a standalone movie, maybe it would have been successful. Who knows?
Yeah, possibly. But oh well, it's there. It's hard to find. It's not streaming on anything. You have to rent it or shell out the money to watch it. But
I think there's a nice Scream Factory edition of it.
Oh, is there?
Yeah,
interesting.
Six was the first one I saw in the movie theater as I think 15-year-old kid, and not a big fan of 6, although I've warmed up to it a little bit over it. It just, it took everything about Halloween and made it as complicated as possible with giving it a motive because of a cult and just everything.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's like the whole cult thing of Curse of Michael Myers. And isn't also Curse of Michael Myers has like numerous cuts? Like there's 2 completely different versions of the movie.
Yes, well, so Daniel Farron's the writer who I have actually met, and I guess I could say I consider him a friend because I met him through Tim, and he's a great guy, and he wrote that, and he had a much different vision for it than I think it ended up becoming, and then they took the producer's cut, which you can now get, and it's very, very different. I mean, it's not incredibly different, but it's different enough that some major plot points are different, and it's interesting, and I do like that one more, but it just, I get what they were trying to do. They wanted to make something fresh related to it, and they added the cult aspect, and they even had the Dr. Wynn from the first one was behind putting Michael in this cult and helping him kill so that they could see what pure evil was like. It just was too much. Again, it's just, I understand that sequels have to do that, but I was just such a fan of the simplicity of the original that it was tough to warm up to sequels that just made it way too complicated.
Well, sure. Also, just the state of horror in the mid-'90s, pre-Scream, was very different. That's just what a huge game changer that movie was with the genre.
Yeah, exactly. And I think after 6... that's when they were looking at doing 7. They had a whole idea for it if Jamie Lee Curtis didn't sign on, but then she kind of spearheaded doing a 20th anniversary to revisit it, which revitalized the whole... it was part of the revitalizing of the horror genre because it was right after Scream and just really was breathing new life into the whole franchise. And at that point, I had never seen someone come back 20 years later to reprise a role. It was just so cool for me.
Right. And it also led to the superior movie Halloween Resurrection.
Sure.
Oh,
with Busta Rhymes and Tyra Banks.
I mean, that is the absolute worst. First off, it's so insulting that they kill off Jamie Lee Curtis in the first scene. And I know that I've heard her speak, and she wanted H2O to be the end, and she wanted to have killed him off.
Yeah.
And she was contractually obliged to do a cameo in a sequel. And I guess her story is she said, well, if you're going to do a sequel and keep him alive and have some weird thing, then you better kill me off because it's just like, you can't keep doing this. Yeah. And so they kill her off, which is ridiculous. And then the internet, it was just so bad. I don't even know where to go with it. There was no suspense, nothing Michael Myers-like. It was ridiculous.
Wasn't
God, it's so bad.
Didn't it have some sort of like reality show angle to it?
They're like live broadcasting from the Myers house.
Dangertainment. But it's just like there's barely any, it's just so, again, it almost feels, it might as well be Halloween 3 Season of the Witch because it felt so disassociated from it. Yes, they had Michael Myers there, but it just didn't feel anything like a Halloween movie. Oh.
Yeah. Oh, man. I think we hit a lot of the sequels.
Yes.
Good. Yeah. I'm glad that we talked about because this movie did spawn this franchise that is pretty epic. There's a lot going on.
We have to get into the main climax of the movie.
Yes,
we should probably finish with that.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's really it's the scariest part of the movie, and this is what I mean when I say that this movie had this reputation for being really scary. And this shit that goes down when Michael does get to Tommy's house and chases Laurie through the house, and they have their kind of like final showdown. That shit, especially that scene in the closet, is so scary. Like,
and just the build up to it that you pretty much see Laurie walk in real time across the street from Tommy's house to Lindsay's house, through the door, through the living room, up the stairs, into the bedroom. You pretty much see that in real time. And I feel like movies like that aren't made anymore. Like, you would cut Laurie across the street, she would be pretty much like inside the house.
Yeah, and I think, again, it was a great way to build suspense. That during that entire walk, which is such a long walk, the music's playing, which gets you scared. You know that something scary and bad is coming. So the fact that they, elongate that scene and you're just listening to music, watching her, it just gives yourself time to be scared. That's what they did so beautifully,
Yeah. And, there's a couple of times that Laurie gets in a couple of good jabs, with the knitting needles, and a couple of times Michael goes down, and each time he goes down, he drops the knife, and each time Laurie walks away, she leaves the knife.
But I do like that moment when she first drops the knife because she just doesn't even want to touch it. Like, she doesn't even want to handle it.
She consciously throws it away.
She consciously throws it down. So I think it works.
It's a stupid move, but Jamie Lee Curtis. We just watched one of the first commentaries, and Jamie Lee Curtis said exactly that, where she said the only thing, because she even admits that it's kind of a dumb move, but she played the character as someone, or I even think she said in the script it has Laurie looks at the knife in such disgust that she doesn't want to even be touching it, just like you said.
Yeah,
but it does get a little ridiculous after the closet scene. And I do agree with you. The closet scene is legitimately a terrifying scene because just that claustrophobic sense of she's stuck in there. Yeah. There's nowhere she can go, and he's coming to get her.
Yep.
It's done so well, and but it shows also how resourceful she is with the hanger, and that she can think fast, and that she actually will fight and keep fighting.
Yeah, for sure. This is where Michael Myers as a character kind of straddles the line of, like, not really supernatural, but
he's the boogeyman.
I mean, in this movie, he's stabbed in the neck with a knitting needle, shot 6 times.
Yeah. I mean, unless Dr. Loomis missed a bunch of those, that would be really tough to get up from. Again, I think that all I would say is that John Carpenter made this not thinking there'd be a sequel. He just left it open-ended. And then now you have to explain, is he supernatural? Is he pure evil? What? Yeah. I could see someone getting up from a knitting needle to the neck. I don't think would kill someone. And even however she stabbed him in the closet, I could see him getting up from all that. But 6 bullets, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the Shape.
He's the Shape.
Can you kill the Shape?
The boogeyman. Well, and then also I feel like in 2018... he's just kind of like this unstoppable force, He just has this, like, inhuman strength.
Yeah, well, it's funny. You were saying we got to the sequels, but 2018 is the one we actually haven't really talked about. And for me, that's like, of all the sequels, that's the closest to at least creating the feeling that Halloween did for me. I mean, having the character of Laurie that felt like Laurie, legitimately caring about characters, building the suspense. But yeah, he's definitely a lot more brutal in the 2018 one, and a lot more unstoppable. There's a lot more fighting, but I think you just look at him as a force of evil, and that's really all you can say.
Yeah, for sure. I think
Did you guys
happens,
like the
2018?
Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, we liked it a lot.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. And it's one of those things that I get people that don't enjoy it, but it's kind of like the Star Wars thing with people that are really into Star Wars that just hate all of the prequels and sequels, that they just feel like they know the series better than its creator. And I just kind of want to be like, yeah, it's a Halloween movie. Chill out. What did you expect? I had fun.
And that's the thing. I feel the same. I could easily be a purist like those people if I wanted to, but the more I've watched 2018, because now that I own it, I've seen it a number of times, I like it more every time I watch it.
Yeah.
I just, I felt like Jamie Lee Curtis did a great performance. You really feel for her. Like, there are scenes when I even feel emotional for her. You can tell that she's suffered, that she feels really bad. I love the 3 generations of Strode women. Strong women are the most responsible ones. I like the connection with the teenagers and having the little Easter eggs of just like the original, like when her granddaughter's looking out from the school, but it's Laurie standing there watching her, or Laurie falling off the roof and then disappearing like he did in the first one. I mean, there's a lot of good parts, and the fact that it's set up a trilogy, I'm psyched. I'm so excited that we have 2 more movies with Jamie Lee Curtis that are going to be coming out over the next 2 years. It's a Halloween fan's dream.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm almost... I won't say that I'm glad that it was pushed, but I like that I have something to look forward to after this shitty year, that we'll have Halloween Kills in 2021.
Yeah, I was first pretty devastated as push because I had been looking forward to this for a long time. But I think, to your point and to the point that I wasn't that surprised, you know? I mean, why would they release right now? It wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't be fun. You couldn't even see it in a theater. And I don't want to watch it at home. I want to go with a huge group of people in a theater.
The only thing that I wish that the movie would have had in, even if it would just been a one brief scene, I wanted to see just a shot of Laurie just by herself. Just processing all of this by herself in her weird, fucked up house. Just like a quiet moment with Laurie.
It sounds like a TV show. A quiet moment with Laurie.
And I just think it's so interesting that it makes sense that after this trauma, Laurie turns into this very right-wing, gun-toting, like... I mean, I wouldn't say that she's a conservative, but she probably votes Republican, so it makes total sense. Just after all
Law
of this
and
trauma,
order.
She just has to have this micro fixation on just like her gun collection, keeping herself safe. So I think it's just a really interesting path for this character.
I also think it's very true to life in that I think we easily undersell how much of an effect any horror movie situation would have on a person if it were real. Just finding your friends dead in a house and fighting off a serial killer would as a kid or as a teenager would really mess you up. So I'm glad that 40 years later they show someone who that has defined her entire life. It just felt really real because you know how the joke in a lot of bad horror movies is that, you know, someone dies and the people say, oh, and just go on from it. Or like, you know, you see your friends dead and there's no reaction. That's so not true. If any one of us witnessed any death, we would be devastated. But so I just felt like it was about time they showed how a survivor, and even in ways that they didn't in H2O. I mean, yes, she was an alcoholic in H2O, but she didn't look like she was truly suffering like the Laurie of 2018 did. And I really respect them for that.
Yeah, for sure. Agreed. Yeah, 2018 is really it's a solid movie. It's a solid reboot, if you even would call it that. But can't talk enough about it. We own it as well, and we watch it several times since we bought it.
I like when you do the timeline, do 1 followed by 2018, because I used to always watch 1, 2, H2O, but now I'm on the 1, 2018 timeline that I like the best.
Agreed.
And she cuts off his head in H2O, so how are you going to explain that?
I mean, again, you have to end the time. In my mind, that timeline ends with H2O because I can't even think of Resurrection as a real movie. So I say 1, 2, H2O, and cutting off the head is the end.
You're not buying that it's the paramedic?
Oh, God. And I love that they say, even in Resurrection, they say, why didn't the paramedic say anything? His windpipe was flat. Okay, why didn't he just take off the mask to show her?
Yeah.
He had his hands, and he was flailing, so take off the mask.
Rip the mask off. Yeah.
Exactly.
Ugh, boy.
Any final thoughts on Halloween 1978?
I know. It's almost time. It's time to wrap it up.
I feel like us homosexuals love a final girl. We love to picture ourselves in their shoes. I think that's kind of why gay men gravitate towards movies like this. And also, we have to give a big shout-out to our Black Christmas episode, because Black Christmas did a lot of the stuff that this movie did in 1974.
Yes. John Carpenter even says Bob Clark really inspired him. It had the slasher, the holiday type, and I love Black Christmas also. But, Halloween, I truly believe it had such an effect on me because, like I've said over and over in this, the simplicity of it, the creepy music, the building of the suspense, the keeping things relatable in a way that it's just someone in a mask, hunting after someone, strong female character who's smart and can hold her own. It just is something that I feel like people are going to like forever. It's never going to be dated. It's timeless.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Wow. Well said. Very well said.
Thanks.
Wow. Well,
Can you tell I like? Can you tell I like this movie?
You seem to be the perfect guest for this episode. What are the odds?
First person who I thought of.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And we will eventually get back on Barbra Streisand with Funny Girl.
Oh, yes, of course. Oh, my God, yes. That would be a great one to talk about. And
we'll circle back on the Funny Girl soon.
Doing Yentl and was great.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show again.
Do you have anything that you want to plug?
Yes, thank you. I would love to plug. So, Tim Murdoch, who you guys have had on the podcast,
yes,
Tim and I have been doing for a while, and we're trying to revamp and really get serious about a podcast called Happy Horror Time, where we do only horror movie reviews. So you can find Happy Horror Time on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or look for the Twitter page or Facebook page. And also my boyfriend, Jacob Randall, who you've also had on the podcast. We're all Movies That Made Us Gay fans. Jacob Randall just unveiled his new podcast, which is called Crime of Your Life. And it is a true crime podcast where he talks about whether it's a unsolved murder or a disappearance or a death faking or something, and he's a great storyteller, and you can find him on all of the same platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everything, and Crime of Your Life on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everything. So please, if you like horror, listen to Happy Horror Time. If you like true crime, listen to Crime of Your Life.
I have a feeling we're going to be hearing from Jacob very, very soon.
Ooh, interesting.
I think so. I think he may just be talking about a horror movie this month, too.
Very fun, very fun. Thanks so much again for coming on the show, man.
Thank you, guys. Seriously, it's been a lot of fun, and I always enjoy being on this podcast.
All right, you're super welcome. Well, have yourself a very happy Halloween.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.
And beware of the boogeyman.
Bye. Bye. And thank you for listening, everybody. That was another great episode.
Good episode.
Love it. Scott, we've got a couple of Patreon shout-outs that we want to give out today.
Yes, we do.
To our lovely patrons. We would like to say hello to our wonderful people on Patreon, starting with
Joshua Clement, Aaron Bent, Jim and Melinda Shirley, Jessica Something, John Miller, Nick Thomas, Christine Asher, Rufino Kabang, Mitch Ralston, Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for patronizing us, people.
And if you want to be a patron, go to patreon.com or download the Patreon app and look us up at Movies That Made Us Gay.
Yes, indeed. You can support us there. You can donate as little as $1 a month. And all of this money goes into helping us keep this podcast afloat. It helps us to get new equipment. It helps us to keep the show on the air. We love you so much for doing that, everybody.
We have to record our commentary.
Yes, we need to record a new commentary.
Watch with us for October.
Mm-hmm. We need one more commentary for October for Patreon subscribers. Ladies and gentlemen, we would also love it if you would give us a good review on iTunes.
Give us a good review on iTunes, and we'll read it on the air.
Yes, indeed. We did some last week. We got 2 new 5-star reviews, and we would love it if you would rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, on iTunes. We would also love it if you would give us 5 stars.
Give us 5 stars.
It just helps.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
We'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week.
For another spooky episode.
Bye.
Bye.